Hello?
Morning.
Morning, how are you?
Okay.
Good.
See if I might quickly try to test if I can present my screen on this device. I may have to log in on another account and do the slides as well or something.
Okay.
But how do I do that? Oh, I guess I can just do this. Yes. Okay. I guess. Can you see that?
Yeah, I can see it.
This. Okay.
There we go.
Cool. Good. So I want to see. I'm using my iPad right now, and I haven't really done this before.
Yeah.
You have to do tweak, maybe change the settings, and you can do it pretty easily. That's it. Anyway, how are you?
Oh, pretty good.
I think Anson's okay, and going to be here, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah, I did get his email last night, so I responded to it. I gave him the link.
Yeah, it's not a big deal, but I think he'll be checking out the lab. We're trying to come to the meetings this summer, so we'll see.
Yeah, that's good. All right. Well, I don't know who else is going to show up. We'll probably, start now, and we'll record the session, so then people will be able to watch it. I know Ankit can't make it today, but okay. So welcome to the meeting. For those of you not with us, you have a treat today. As Jesse went to ICLR, which is one of the machine learning conferences, and he came back with a very impressive presentation of things. He was very excited about it on our Slack channel, and he's going to present on his experience. And then we'll talk about maybe a blog post.
Sorry.
Okay.
But
yeah. So yeah, I share your screen.
Okay, let's try this again. It should be good because I just did it.
Here's Anson.
Oh, hey, Anson.
Welcome.
Can't hear you, Anson, if you're saying anything. Should I just restart things, or I didn't proceed with the presentation or anything. But.
Yeah, well, we can. I don't know if Anson wants to introduce himself, but just to the group. Stefan. Hello, Stefan.
Stefan.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess. So I mean, why don't we just go ahead with Jesse's presentation on ICLR, the slides, and then we can talk about. Yeah, I don't think your audio is working. I didn't hear anything. We've been having some difficulties with the space today, so I don't know. It might not work.
Yeah, I'm not.
You can type in the chat if you want. Yeah. So this is Anson. This is a new member of the group. He's a friend of Jesse's. Nice to meet you, Anson. He's interested in a lot of the topics we talk about in this group, and so he's going to join us over the summer and do some things. And him and I will talk later a bit, and then maybe in future meetings we can do a little bit more interaction. And so it's usually a little bit less technically glitchy than it is today, but that's the way these things go. So welcome, Anson. And Stefan, well, thanks for joining. Jesse, why don't you share your screen?
Okay. I think I can hear Anson's keyboards now, so can you talk, Anson?
Hello.
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay, that's weird, but okay. Hello.
Did you want to say anything about yourself before I start?
Yeah, I am currently a data science major. I minor in philosophy, but I'm angling to switch to something computational neuroscience for grad school, but I'm pretty open in my interests right now. I'm sorry for my groggy lighting situation right now.
I'm not even trying to be on camera right now, so I caught that in the morning. So, but yeah,
it's a horror movie right now.
It's okay. Yeah. So, have you have you heard about NeuroMatch and the summer school and all that?
I applied.
Okay, good. Yeah. So I applied to be a mentor, and Jesse applied as well. So.
Yeah, I actually got one of the new eligible professors to apply to be a mentor too.
Okay.
I'm spreading the good word.
I think it's, by the way, I just want to say that on my side is probably, it won't work this summer because of the schedule and, all this master's applications and stuff.
Yeah.
I also have a bunch of really hard courses at the university, like theoretical informatics, for instance.
Wow. Well, that's fine, yeah.
So, yeah, but maybe I'll do it, like, some in the years later. I mean, I also have my master's that I'm planning to do, so I guess I will have a lot of time to take part at some summer in the few coming years.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Jesse, why don't you share your slides?
Okay, here we go. Just be starting 3, 2, 1. Let me know if you can see that.
Okay. Yep.
All right. So if you're seeing what I'm seeing, you're seeing the interest level brief tour of ICLR. I didn't know how to say ICLR, but ICLR 2020. It was Sunday through Thursday of this week, and I to it kind of randomly because I saw a volunteer opportunity, and I sort of knew about ICLR, but I didn't really, and I feel like I kind of got lucky to get into it when I did. So I went to the main conference. I had my day job, so I wasn't there entirely, but I did operate as a volunteer when I could, kind of test things out beforehand, and then trying to assist with some of the technical stuff and just people navigating the virtual conference during it. And then the BAICS Workshop was really cool. Just to kind of what I'm going to cover here, this isn't going to be a technically in-depth presentation, but it's going to be, I'm going to cover a bunch of things that happened, and if you want to go back and talk about them, we'll just bring them up later. You can see the stats on the right. There were like almost double, probably because of being online and wanting things to do, and to be honest, you may have heard things about ICLR's. I wish I could. If I thought about it, I would have put some of the animated GIFs that one of the web designers made into the conference to show how the web base worked. It was really unprecedented. It was really quite amazing because they synced Rocket Chat with both the. You could have Rocket Chat in various places in just like a standalone discussion group, and then also simultaneously on the same page with the actual presentation. And all of the presented talks were pre-recorded, which is very good idea, and I think will become a trend for a lot of conferences. But they had live sessions as well, and the live sessions you could be in Rocket Chat, or some would break out into Zoom meetings or whatnot. There were a few different ways they did it. It was really well coordinated, and I've never really seen a conference like that, or design. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, I'm going to cover the BAICS workshop, or the BAICS. I always want to say basic BAICS as one of the presenters we keep saying. BAICS workshop. Ruha Benjamin, who spoke a lot about ethics in tech. Brian Cox from IBM, Neurosymbolic reasoning. That was really cool. That was a bit above me, but it touched on a lot of the concepts that we're kind of working on at a much more accessible level here in the lab right now. The social session embodiment was very cool, and much. I didn't really know what to expect, but that was very cool. And then one of the bigger names of like legendary names of Rich Sutton and Lacoon and Bengio, they all had kind of some like the wise elders kind of saying some of the wisdom for the young people in their presentations. Lacoon and Bengio had their own sort of 20-minute talks, which were good. I didn't really get into them, and I won't talk about them here, but that's what to look forward to here. So next, the BAICS workshop. I didn't know anything about the BAICS workshop until like 36 hours before it happened. But I'm really glad I went. It's the most tailored thing that I've ever been to towards my direct interest in some ways. They really brought together quite a few things. And the intro workshop, the introductory remarks were very cool, and I would recommend that. It's very applicable to my Frontier Map project, and a lot of people getting out and getting started in the field. That'd probably be a good place to start to look at this sort of BAICS workshop for a lot of people. And they had a series of things about how overlapping things were, and like the first NERIS or NIPS conference, overlapping with the, I think it was ICLR or related to conference, and they have you can see them kind of hands off a bit. They keep showing these ways that machine learning and is kind of or machine learning and computer science would sort of becoming closer and farther apart, and from AI winters and different concepts. It was a good overview of things. And they kind of concluded with open that array of both skills about generalization, learning representations from different data, and boundary cognition and involvement. So that was very. This is a very nice kind of crash course in a 15-minute preview. I would note also, I believe all of these slides, pretty much every time I'm pretty sure on slideslive.com. I'm not sure how it's being packaged or released right now, but obviously some things in the ICLR website aren't, like they're doing a very good job of archiving the Rocket Chat, but I'm not quite sure what's going to be publicly available yet. But these slides right now, as far as I can tell, are all there. And the BAICS workshop concluded with a really cool list of just influential ideas and concepts and people around them. So we can come back to that or reference that later. Thank you for this. This was, I believe, didn't quite put her name here, but it was Dr. Judy Fahn from San Diego State University. And I really liked her talk. I'm probably going to be talking to her more. We connected a little bit afterwards. And her talk was basically about cognitive tools, or how interactions with the environment. In this case, this presentation was specifically about sketching and drawing, and how that created new cognitive spaces, basically. And as I say in the comment on the right, it's sort of she had a very she took, I forgot who she took the cognitive tools. It's a term someone else used, but she's applying it here specifically with drawing. But it was a very interesting concept of how to how to expand the space of cognitive capacity by creating very simple representations through drawing, and sort of the act of physically interacting with the world, and then also creating a very simple representation physically, and how that affects the internal space. So that was very cool, and I would note that as a highlight for me. One thing that came up at the end of it was they created a learning list. This is something that everybody has access to, which has kind of things people thought about, some courses, papers, and so on. And of course, another plug directly here for NeuroMatch Academy, which we actually already spoke about. But as far as I know, that application deadline has been extended for mentors, teaching assistants, and regular student applicants until May 7th. And it came up a bunch of times at ICLR. People from Venezuela were asking, hey, we need a little bit more focus and outreach. What are things we can do? And I mentioned ICLR. And a few other people were looking for summer schools related to things adjacent to or directly related to, like, computational neuroscience. So again, NeuroMatch to the rescue. That's cool. The next talk, or next thing I wanted to talk about, I guess, is Dr. Ruha Benjamin. Anson, remember her from Princeton and Vision. And I really liked her talk there. And this talk that she gave was quite similar. Oh, sorry for background noise here. Was quite similar. I actually like this one a little bit better, just because it seemed it was very much similar, but then a little bit more. I don't know. Even her point was even more clear, I guess. I'm not sure how to say that. Clear, maybe. But this is the title of it. Reimagining the default settings for technology and society. Very cool sort of techno-future graphics. This quote was interesting in her presentation. A lot of her work appears to be about questioning the default settings and questioning whether, how do we get a comparison, which if you really want to go deep philosophical about it, it's actually quite similar to Rich Sutton's point about better lessons in AI and tailoring things to specific context versus overall abilities, but we'll talk about that a little later. Dr. Benjamin really went into she didn't go into this in detail, but if I had more time, like I was talking to her directly, I would have really said yes. I think it's extremely important for people to realize the history of how some of our technology has directly affected politics, and its use is co-opted in political ways. I think it's a very important thing to think about, especially for people who are designing a lot of the architecture that will affect how humans relate to each other in the future. And this is kind of the main quote of the summary quote for her presentation, and really just hearkening that it's not really going to be good enough for computational learning in itself. It isn't going to really cut it. This actually is taken from Black and AI. I think their Instagram account or something. It's a good image. Next up was Brian Cox from IBM, Neurosymbolic Reasoning. I'm kind of just going to mention a few things here, but it was a very good talk and very interesting regarding what we're trying to do in the lab. So he spoke a lot about neurosymbolic AI and trying to combine this, creating these symbolic terms and ways of doing things with basically making a hybrid model, and which is a lot of people are pointing to, and is what they're doing in IBM towards this end. I think this was his concluding slide, and I think it's a pretty good graphical overview of okay, neural networks are these sequential processes of layers of data, and then the symbolic sort of slightly more binary yes or no tree of decision, and trying to get that together. And you can maybe equate that to some of what we're trying to do, especially this summer, by adding a deeper representational layer with cognitive contextual geometric structures. But if I go back a little bit, yeah, I think I took them out, but I had some other slides about various ways that he was. There were many different ways that he was applying this to what they were doing, and you can see on the left side that he went in depth about how, okay, you see the item on the page, but can you group them by large, shiny metal objects, or what are the balls, the spheres on the page, or what is red, and how is red a concept that can be transferred and tagged across many different classes of specific objects, and is it a meta class, or how do we learn about these sort of interchangeable descriptors and labels? So it is very good, and I would recommend that may be one of the. I may recommend this as the most applicable to people in the lab, for some of the direct applications, and for some of the higher level, like so much more state of the art and advanced and new, varied ways of applying the kind of things we're trying to do here. But I think that's it for Brian. Up next was the Embodied Intelligence Agora, which is, I think, like a Greek gathering place or something like that. But it is the social. There were a bunch of socials for specific, kind of like the birds of a feather groups, meetings, and some other conferences. This was Embodied Intelligence, and I, of course, wanted to go to this one. I was a little bit disappointed, which is kind of it's almost funny that I use the word. I kind of wanted, there were only like 20 people in this group, but I think they split up because about half the group was people from DeepMind, and I think they just didn't want to talk to each other directly anymore. I guess I can understand, but the group split up, but then apparently they went back and forth about. I don't think I have any other. Well, I do have one more slide about this, but it was great. It's so hard to encapsulate the free-form discussion, but my takeaway is embodiment and embodied intelligence is a huge thing at at a much higher level than I realized. Like, I know this is probably just my naivete about things, but I didn't understand how much deep mind was looking into it, or people in that level of things were really pursuing it. I wanted to highlight this paper as particularly interesting to me because when I was writing my Google Summer of Code reach goals, I would have quoted this paper. I'm not going to. This is way more advanced than I would be able to do, obviously, at this point. But this is the concept of it in many ways. And this paper, Autocurricular and Emergence of Innovation from Social Interactions, a manifesto for multi-agent intelligence research, is how agents across generations shape environments and sort of adapt towards this process of making it easier to learn, and being able to sort of have this transgenerational influence. And it's really cool. Moving along, Rich Sutton was there, and there's a lot of text on these slides, so you can kind of read what you want, and we'll go over some of it. But Rich Sutton, the bitter lesson is an essay he wrote last year, and, or at least that's what the date is. The social was basically him, Rich Sutton, talking for 2 hours. It was really cool. The main point is that it's very easy for humans to put it one way, it's sort of a critical look at how our sort of ego or cognitive centrism affects our inclination to work on certain projects in like AI and machine learning. I was fortunate enough to be in the group with him at the Zoom meeting, and I took some time outside, so I was riding around my favorite park, listening to this on my bicycle, and it was a very kind of surreal, nice experience when that happened. This is kind of what I was saying. We have to learn a bit of lesson that building in how we think does not work in the long run. Well, what does that really mean? He breaks it down into 4 parts, basically. In first, my slides are advancing. Oh, it's not highlighting. Okay, sorry. The highlighter isn't working right here for the highlighting different parts of this, but anyway, the first part's about how we create the agents and what we're kind of putting in as sort of this contextual and human, like sort of not really hard coding necessarily, but sort of hard coding human understanding into it. It's very helpful in the short term because it sort of creates it creates a shortcut in a way, but it's ultimately, and he points out how it's satisfying to the researcher, like, oh great, it's very easily identifiable progress that we're making with this, how I'm doing it as a human being. But he says in point 3, this can actually short change things in the long run. And in point 4, progress tends to come through undermining that and challenging that, which can be bitter because you're taking something easily accessible as a handcrafted, and I'm putting my own experience and knowledge in this as a human being, but then you're realizing, oh, actually there may be better ways to do this, which I think is a very interesting and somewhat almost a spiritual perspective about the process, if you will. And then this is sort of the conclusion of the essay itself, and he basically says, building in our discoveries only makes it harder to see how discovering processes can be done. And he's very much an advocate for, hey, you have to look at how is learning, how is computation going to be affected, and it's kind of a somewhat radical perspective in the sense that it's somewhat agnostic to this came up later in the following talk, the chat with LeCun and Bengio about deep learning as being it's kind of heralded as the savior for a lot of things right now, but there's this consensus that okay, well, there's only so much of this particular technique can do, and there's even LeCun and Bengio are like, yes, deep learning is where a lot of things are, but it isn't everything necessarily. And we have to understand that that's just one tool or one sort of method in an overall situation. Anson, could you mute your mic here for background noise?
Oh, my mic is already muted.
That's probably me. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And the discussion, I think that's the last slide for that. Yeah, the discussion was very good. It's hard to encapsulate it, but essentially Rich Sutton talking to all of us. There were a lot of people. There were a number of people, and he just sort of had 2 hours of freestyle talk and different applications. And it was quite a nice experience, and I think a lot of younger researchers will really benefit from, particularly this talk and the talk had seemed very kind of nicely geared towards me or our younger students here who don't have a lot of
I don't know. There he is.
And then, oops, I have a T in my slides. Well, so Bengio and LeCun were sort of collections from the Turing Award winners. You can see on the right, just to mention them. This was on the right is the future of supervised. That's LeCun's talk. Was about 20 minutes. I got to be a little bit a part of it. And he's kind of, this highlight basically is for him about how unsupervised and sort of and AI learning to teach itself, and how do we do that is sort of the major way to go as he sees it. Joshua Bengio's specific talk was deep learning with priors associated with consciousness. I didn't. Those look like very cool individual talks. I'm not going to go into them here. I'm mostly going to focus on what they said in the discussion, which is more, just to kind of point it out on the left. Okay. Well, anyway, I'm just going to go to some different points here in the talk. One of them is they had a section of, it was brief, but it was, I think there's a lot of understanding in when they took time out to spoke about this specifically. They talked about how as younger researchers they weren't really invested in a lot of interpersonal stuff, and kind of they grew a lot in that sense, and now really value being a good lab mate, being a good person, and it was interesting because Joshua Bengio used the phrase emotionally rewarding, and I thought I've had a ton of, let's say, emotionally unrewarding experiences in my lab career and getting to know places and some of my work in undergraduate stuff, and I think that's common. That's sort of how that's part of getting into things, but it's also a realization that as much as possible you can some of that can be mitigated through treating people well and as human beings in the process of learning. So I think that was a very cool point. Probably my favorite straight remark from the discussion was Jan LeCun saying AGI doesn't exist, and I why I like it is because it was sort of this nod to, let's say, embodiment. Like I said, as my own words there. But I feel like it's an important sort of context towards things, and in a way, I see embodiment as a very interesting way to think about what Rich Sutton was saying in terms of the bitter lesson, and realizing that he would probably say.
Jesse?
Yeah, he froze for me too.
Yeah. I think you froze, Jesse. I don't know. I can't hear you anymore.
Earlier I had to quit and rejoin. Oh, did you come back, Jesse?
What's that?
Oh, no, you're okay now.
You froze for like a minute.
Oh, it says, all right, there you go. You're okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, what was the last thing you guys heard?
Just kind of finishing up the slide here, I think.
Okay. Yeah, basically, it's very interesting nod to embodiment and realizing what people sometimes describe artificial intelligence as this thing that's just they were asked at one point to kind of compare and contrast to what Richard Sutton said, and it was very interesting because the way things were brought up, it was almost, are you going to disagree with him about it? But they all seemed on the same page ultimately about understanding that studying, learning, and computation is sort of its own pursuit, and shouldn't necessarily be too constrained by just everybody loves deep learning right now. Like a lot of their talk was saying, when we started, a lot of things that would lead to deep learning, a lot of things that would lead to neural networks. Nobody cared. Like people dismissed it, and people got rejected, and people thought, this we don't have the really means to build this out. So they talked quite a bit about determination and trusting your instincts, and the whole, it's kind of a lot of historical context for what has been happening and how, a lot of allusions to past work and things happening in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and how that, we're still kind of reconnecting with those things. So that was a very interesting part of the discussion. Yeah, they recommended some books. Jan recommended QED by Phelan. Which was a really interesting book to me that I want to look more into. Thinking Fast and Slow comes up a lot in all this stuff, Systems 1 and Systems 2 thinking. I think Benjo mentioned Sapiens and Homo Deus by Harari. So that was interesting that they recommended those. This is a little bit more about LeCun's personal talk, I believe. Learning models for control. And how he evoked it down a little bit. More about his interest in unsupervised learning, basically here. And I just mentioned a lot of the diversity after the wind ICLR. I think that was pretty cool. Women, many different groups, and I would point out. The lapsed physicist wine and cheese social. I did not go to that, but I think that was probably the best conference. People who are sort of ex-physicists or people who are no longer currently there. That was interesting. There was usually go to a conference, you get a T-shirt or something, or some kind of swag. I got a certificate, which is I think kind of funny, and I didn't realize it, but someone else pointed out on Twitter. I was like, okay, I get certificates, great. And I would say, thank you, ICLR, for the volunteer opportunity. It was cool. We opened up doors, so I appreciate that. And then there were a bunch of resources here from the BAICS document that I had before and can link out to people. I would again mention Slides Live. There were a lot of things appeared to be on Slides Live, and I would recommend that. Oh boy, I didn't realize how long it was taking to do this, so sorry guys. And a bunch of other links on the right side. But I think that's pretty much my 40-minute presentation here.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that. That was very good. Would you mind sharing a copy of your slides by putting a link in the chat?
Yeah, I will. I may also put it in Slack, but they are available online, so I'll do that. Anyway.
Yeah. So thank you. Yeah, that was very good. I'm thinking about. So first of all, does anyone have any questions about the slides? Anything of interest that they really found noteworthy?
I really found Rich Sutton's point interesting about computation versus, I think he said, I don't think he said death, but it was computation versus searching and seeking. My understanding was that it was computation versus just basically putting in your own understanding. I think that was interesting, the idea that I think that's something that I've been aware of for a long time, but haven't been able to elegantly state. So I think that was really fascinating. But something that I'll probably reference in the future.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool that. Sorry, I can't move my screen. I think it's pretty cool that you can. It's a really cool essay because it allows you to say, "Hey, Rich Sutton is very respected person." Rich Sutton did a lesson.
Yeah, that's really pithy too. Yeah.
It offers you this way of talking about it. Because I think you and I have talked about this some before about putting a lot of human cognitive egocentrism in things. So yeah, that's very cool.
It's been a little while since I took formal logic, but the neurosymbolic stuff is very formal logic-y, when I took formal logic, it was there is this if-then statements about red triangles, squares, circles, larger, smaller, different colors.
Yeah, I wanted to put more slides in about this, but they broke it down in a bunch of different sort of classes of project where this is happening, and the way they talked about middleware was really interesting. So I would recommend looking into that more.
Yeah, I could see that directly being inspired by that, probably.
Yeah, I actually also have a take on this talk about the human egoism in doing this whole, where I really see the good old Kantian point of view. That we don't have this pure cognition, if you want. And for me, it's really interesting whether the guy who's presented it, what was his name once again? Whether he talks about probably that's him. What was his take on this? How could we potentially get rid of this so to say human bias looking at the science? Because you can't do it 100% apparently, because we are still humans and we're still pessimistically say trapped, optimistically said maybe having this kind of quality of being human, and hence all of the research that grows from us or that we do conduct is of course biased. But what would be the possible movement in the direction, maybe if it can say so, of getting rid of it?
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think to come a little bit, I obviously am not speaking for Sutton himself. I like what he was saying. I would appreciate him saying it's important to be very humble about that because we're operating, we're embodied in our human experience for sure. But I think as much as possible, you should be aware that there'll be a lot of temptation for you to tailor things to putting in our methods for thinking. And as much as possible, he's kind of an advocate against just being aware of when you're doing that and trying to allow for there to be other ways that computational learning can happen, and not letting, just because it's how we do it, doesn't mean permission to do it. So I feel like he would say it's less a commentary on human beings and more try as much as possible to study. It's almost like a sense of respect for computation in and of itself, even understanding that we cannot be free from who we are, kind of a thing. It's very kind of philosophical in a way, but yeah. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I had a comment, so it's kind of this in another slide. So like, I think also what something he's getting at is like how we thought about AI, like the GoFi approach, which is that you tried to build a mental model of how intelligence worked, and it was there was a logical system there, so you kind of had to figure out how the mind worked. But we don't really know how the mind works, so you create this model.
Oh yeah.
You try to make it execute, and then you find out, well, it doesn't really work. So this figure actually is nice because, and I like this one a lot. Yeah, the one you have up right now, because it kind of like we have like artificial intelligence. We're trying to like sort of state how the mind works, but as you can see in cognitive science, we don't really understand very well on how the mind works. We're kind of developing different techniques, and so it's hard to build a top-down model like that when you don't even really know how the mind works. It's really hard. And so like of course the performance plateaus because you build it based on some really simple principles, but they're not necessarily universal or complete. So a lot of the GoFi is it's like game playing and things like that. So you can play games of perfect information like chess or something like that. And you can do that, but then you can't really generalize very well. So all that, it kind of hits up against this threshold of sort of how we know the mind works. But if you don't really know how the mind works, then you have a problem. So I love this slide though, because the one you have up right now, because it shows the sort of the relationship between AI and cognitive science. It's kind of like how they converge and diverge. So, yeah.
I actually, coming back to Kant, if you allow me on display, here. So basically, as we know, Immanuel Kant had two types of mind, so to say, in his works, one of which is Verstand, which could be explained as, maybe some more mechanistical or thinking based on senses, like smelling the taste of food or just seeing some natural phenomena with your eyes. And on top of it, there was so-called Vernunft, which is basically the pure mindful operations, or the area of where we conduct our higher order cognitive functions, for instance, where we can just complete a theory with the logic that we have inherently or that we kind of agree on. And so if you look at this way, it's actually really interesting that that apparently we can't really understand or reflect on the fact how we reflect, because we kind of don't have a higher order psychological mechanism for understanding how our higher order senses work, or like. So we have like this Vernunft, which is on top of it all, and so we can't really reflect on it, because that's ultimately the apparatus which we use to reflect on something. But maybe I'm thinking about it, like it's not attached to some background or so, but maybe we can reflect, fully reflect on this lower Verstand functions, like we can reflect on how do we sense the nature of phenomena surrounding us, using our, like looking at them, or tasting something, or smelling something, this kind of things. So maybe here we would want to not just say that mind, like we can't understand how mind works, but also maybe categorize mind functions based on their order, and then talk about that as well. We can do comprehend some functions of mind, which are lower order ones, but of course higher order ones are still locked. And that's one fact, which would be like comprehensible and which would still be comprehensible scenario.
Just double check. In English, would that be a priori and a posteriori?
I don't think so.
No, I'm not sure. No.
Oh, probably not. Then never mind.
Yeah, but that would be connected. I mean, a priori and a posteriori. Yeah, that's. I think I'm not quite sure, but I think that's just reflects the order of how this functions, or how I call them, like functions of mind were given to us in which order. So what was given the first and what was given the last, so to say. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's I really like all of what you said, Stefan. I think that's really cool, and I would say, in kind of combining Rich, Sutton, and even Benji and LeCun, I think they would add a lot of their. LeCun and Benji kind of mentioned some of their, like, starting out, some of the core drivers were like, I want to understand intelligence in and of itself, and kind of building out artificial intelligence is sort of, in some ways, we don't. There's higher level sentience and intelligence here on the planet, okay, to some extent, but some people talk, when they speak about, like, they didn't say this specifically, but I'm saying, like, if we found another extraterrestrial intelligence, that would be something to compare ourselves to. But kind of one of the best things we can do now to understand our intelligence is to build intelligence that works somewhat separately from us. And a lot of AI is this other case study that we can use, and it has different bounds for sure from its embodiment or whatever else. So I very much agree with this. Kind of mechanically speaking, there's definitely a limit to what human beings can, like, self-observe. I think that's a really important point, and kind of a big point in embodiment, and a big point in, understanding sort of a necessary humbleness for what we can't really get a hand on. And I feel like, and to kind of go back to what Bradley said about there's just so much stuff going on inside of the mind and the brain right now. We don't know it. And I think Rich Sutton's point about that was here. He basically says, look, we don't have this right now. We can't really base around this. And basically exactly what Bradley said about kind of the best we can do is identify the reductions and the shortcuts we're making in order to, give ourselves a very simple, reduced version of how a mind works, and say, okay, well, that's kind of what that is. But even though it's not how our mind works, or we can necessarily understand it there are other ways that computation learning can be done, and kind of just try to, for lack of better terms, have empathy for that process, and try to study it, even though we can't. Or I would also add, like, this is sort of a Elon Musk and Neuralace inspired remark of, there may be ways to kind of augment our ability to comprehend some things, but I think that's even, I would still say everything that Stefan said ultimately applies into that, because I don't, for the time being, I think we have some very, very hard limits on what we can process in our own minds. So, yeah.
I don't need to review the literature, but I think it'd be interesting to compare Rich Sutton's idea with the idea of common science and scientific revolution in philosophy of science. I think the idea that you have the continuation of established and concrete paradigms.
Was that Mars layers of science? I forgot who.
I know there's, it's been a while since I took philosophy science. There's Kuhn, there's...
Kuhn's like revolution, basic science.
There's different authors, yeah. Then, so, yeah, I want to review the literature.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's like, where would he fit in with the sense of how mature is the field, and is it in a period of stability or growth and whatnot? And
I think when you apply Rick Sutton's idea to the individual, I think it's obvious that the individual, putting this burden on the individual, of course the individual is unable to figure out within the lifespan, somehow figure out how the mind works. But again, I think in the context of both of the sciences and scientific revolution, I think when you put it in that perspective, the scientific revolution, I think that kind of makes sense. That like, oh, okay, through cycles of scientific revolution, each cycle, this advice to be aware of computation as part of scientific revolution is interesting.
Yeah, I thought about it also like in a general sense of that, and like Hegelian dialects of overcorrecting and kind of so on and so forth. I don't know. I'm happy to talk about this, but I don't know how much. I know it's 11 o'clock now, so I kind of took up this whole present meeting with my talk, so I don't know if Bradley wanted to talk about it.
Oh, well, I mean, I think this is probably good. I just wanted to make one more point about the slides. So the second point I had was that there's something they called autocurriculum, which was, I think, one of the things that in one of the discussions.
Like this one?
Back further in the slide deck. Yeah, that one. So
yeah.
This was interesting. I didn't find a lot online about it. I kind of looked it up after I saw the term. You had some stuff on Slack about this, but I think this is an interesting maybe way to get around the mental models as well. I mean, when you like try to assume how the brain works, is to build some sort of emergent system where you can teach the thing. There's a sort of emergent curriculum that it learns, and then there's this. So you're not like telling it how to learn. It's just learning on its own, but you give it sort of guidance in terms of how to put together what it needs to know to learn. So, I mean, I really don't understand it myself that well, but I think this is a really interesting idea, and I couldn't really find a lot on it. But
is it related to discussion about what are the big debate? What are the priors of human mind? How much is it a blank slate or not? And what is the necessary amount of sort of inherited knowledge or understanding or methodology? And I feel like what you said reminded me of is what's the relationship between essentially, for lack of better terms, the embodiment of the sensory processes that we're in, if we took the mind and put it in a different body or different context, how would it, like, is it the mind is part of the sensory motor experience? And is it part of, especially now, for human beings, more so than probably most, like, is it culturally, socially attuned to, adapted to a particular curricula?
Right. Well, I think there's always that issue in education about, like, how do people learn, and so there's a huge amount of debate as to how people actually learn. What's the best way to deliver content. With virtual learning, it's a whole new ballgame where you have to, like, figure out how, if people can be engaged in the material, but so it's like, but in this case, it's not. There is a part of, like, innateness versus acquiredness. Like, how much would you have to build into your agent, sort of a priori, hardwired in a sense, to get it to learn things? Can it just learn from nothing, or do you have to have, like, a framework? But I mean, like, there's also this issue of how do you structure things so that the agent can learn it. I mean, you could have, like, you could have a huge amount of investment in a sort of an architecture that tells it how to learn, and then if it encounters things that it's never encountered before, is it going to be able to incorporate it? And so, if you just let it, by contrast, if you just let things emerge, like if you just let it put together pieces and kind of figure out the relationships and then find new ways to learn, maybe that's more effective.
That point came up a lot in Rich Sutton and Ruha Benjamin in many different ways. I think that way of phrasing it and that concept is a very powerful one, and one that it serves as a touch point for many related issues in learning, basically.
Yeah. Well, I think that's good. We're at the top of the hour now in the meeting, so I want to go over a couple things before we go. One of those is that I mentioned that we eventually, I guess, so this is a nice set of slides, and one thing we can do with these is turn it into a blog post. So I think I mentioned to Jesse that, I've done a couple. Let me share my screen, actually. My entire screen. So I'll take over, and I want to present. I just want to show a couple of examples of this, if it lets me share. I don't know if it's going to.
I don't know how to get out of my broadcasting, actually. I think I might have to exit mine.
Okay.
Did it leave yet?
It's still stuck here for me. I don't know if my browser's stuck or what.
Just in case I'm going to come back to the meeting.
Okay. Alright. I think mine's stuck anyways. So why don't I not share my screen? Why don't I just, well, maybe we'll do this next week with the blog posts. So let's talk about that next week. And I can share some links in Slack. So it's just a matter of taking the slides and putting them into a blog post, and then maybe annotating the slides with some text. I think that's a good way to do it. But we can talk about that more next week. And then we also have to finish up on the CSB Conf presentation. I have so we'll work on that next week, and we'll do it like a dry run of it. Go through the slides.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's good. I think that'll work. I don't know why this is taking so long, but why don't we just wrap up for today? Thanks for attending the meeting. Thank you, Anson, for showing up for your inaugural meeting, and hopefully we can meet offline here or in another meeting sometime during the week to kind of discuss your interests further, so we can get a better idea of what you might want to do this summer.
Yep, it was good to meet you, Dr. Alicea.
Yeah, thank you. Good to meet you too. Thank you, Stefan, for attending, and I hope you found this meeting useful.
Sure.
Oh, also,
Yeah, I did.
good stuff.
Thank you, Jesse, for the nice presentation.
Yeah, good luck with everything ahead for you, and stay in touch, and hope for the best for you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank
By the way, Stefan, what was the Kantian term used again? What was the Kantian term used again? The one that mixed up with free?
Case.
Yeah, it was Verstand and Vernunft. Do you want me to pronounce it? Or
Could you spell it?
Yeah, it would be VERNUNFT. So that's this kind of like big reflection function. Whereas VERSTAND. Did you capture it?
It's like
kind of. Yeah, so this Verstand, the second term stands for like, more lower order cognitive functions like senses, or just tools we use to comprehend what's really going on around us in nature. Whereas the first term stands for the cognitive functions in say it's like our theoretical or logical apparatus that we have in our minds.
So like theory versus senses.
Yeah, it's a little bit harder than that. I mean, I would recommend reading the sources, so then you...
I'll look into it a little bit.
Yeah, it's a nice thing.
Well, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, it's fun to study philosophy, by the way, just last thing I wanted to say, because my mother is a philosopher, and that's why I also know...
Oh, nice!
It's my mind. I start dabbling in a little.
Okay, that's a good stuff. Yeah, well.